I first have to say, this is really wonderful. 15 months of not being able to be present with you. And my muscle memory has to come back and about this. And I'm sort of tingling up here. It's really quite wonderful. And I'm delighted to be here with you. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. He had just finished teaching the crowds as he stood in the boat offshore. And after asking the disciples to get in, to row the boat from the Jewish side to the Gentile side of the lake, he grew tired, apparently, from all his exertions and fell asleep in the stern. Suddenly there arose a violent storm, and the language used in the Greek, it's like a tornado-like storm. Water was quickly filling the boat, and the disciples became terrified. The sudden storm didn't wake Jesus up, however. He kept on sleeping. They had to wake him up. Seems as though the storm was no big deal for him. He was serene, almost above it all. We're meant to think of certain Old Testament texts where people feel they need to wake up God so that he can address their concerns. Psalm 35 is one of them. You have seen, O Lord, do not be silent. O Lord, do not be far from me. Wake up, bestir yourself for my defense, for my cause, my God and my Lord. There's also a subtle allusion to the story of Jonah, who, when that mighty storm came, he was sound asleep, in the hole of the ship, and they woke him up, and he was able to help them with their situation, just as Jesus did. The details of the story are significant. There are other boats filled with people who are with him. They are with Jesus, which in Markan terminology means they are also disciples. So the folks that were on the lake were not just the closest, most intimate disciples of Jesus, but a broader group of disciples, which tells us that there's room for us in the story as well. When Jesus wakes up, he exorcises the water, rebuking it as if it were an evil spirit possessing the waves, using language similar to a previous occasion in Mark where he exorcises an evil spirit from an individual. We know that for ancient people, the sea, especially in its violent moments, was a symbol for destructive powers that were much more than merely natural. So Jesus here is revealing himself as having God-like powers. He is a master of the sea as he is master of evil spirits. He is a teacher powerful in both word, as he was on talking to the crowds in parables a few moments ago, and now in deed. The disciples' terror dismays Jesus. He's been with them for a while now, but they don't have the depth of trust in him that he longs for them to have. Over the course of the disciple, they will be people of little faith. Faith, but little faith. It's a fragile thing, always in danger of weakening yet more. Maybe another reason why there's room for me in that boat. What do we make of the story as a whole? It's certainly anchored in Jesus' ministry as one who is remembered in the early church as a prophet, as I said, powerful in word and in deed. And we know there were times when he went out onto the lake with his disciples, and his followers recalled very strongly after the resurrection how he showed mastery over evil spirits, which is a major pattern in Mark's gospel. It'd be a short step to go from Jesus, master of evil spirits, to Jesus, master over violent waters. I'm not sure that for the early church, this one time, this one-off event when Jesus calmed the waters was the most important thing for them, for the early believers. I think they saw the story as reminding them of a very powerful truth of faith that they could sometimes forget. Because in the New Testament, the boat becomes a symbol of church. So this is a church story in a way. And the early church knew a lot about smooth and rough sailing, especially during the time of persecution, which apparently was facing the Markan community. The church in the past is known rough sailing and smooth sailing, and that's our situation too, isn't it? The American bishop's recent vote in favor of drafting a document on the Eucharist and Catholic public officials has certainly produced a lot of waves in just a couple of days. For some Catholics, it's a very reassuring move. For others, a cause of great dismay. One thing that's certain is the bark of Peter is divided, very seriously divided. The American population, Catholic population is divided, but there's also the tensions between the Vatican and the American episcopacy right now, which is right out there in the public arena. If this were only the one stress point in the church's life right now, but of course it isn't. We continue, and we will continue for a longest time to live with major issues in our church that call us to take a stand. You know, the rightful role of women in the church. I continue to walk in spiritual direction with women who are holding on or staying in the church, but want their sense of call to be tested. And it goes nowhere, of course. The magisterium's position on same-sex love and transgender people. For some people, this is an issue of faith. For others, it's an issue of science that is improperly being considered a matter of faith. We have the clerical sex abuse issue, which again at Georgetown, an event of 30 years ago came up 2 weeks ago that we had to face about a deceased Jesuit in our community who had a very powerful position at the university. The history of the church's relation to and implication in white supremacy. Yesterday was Juneteenth, but it was also the anniversary, the actual day in 1838 when we Maryland Province Jesuits sold 272 enslaved children, women, and men to 2 Louisiana slave traders who were very vicious people and didn't keep their promises in the sale. It just thickens and thickens, doesn't it? When this parable or this story of violent storms, you know, is not just about outside storms battering the bark of Peter, it's storms right inside among us. The risen Lord Jesus, and this is a point of the story, is head of the church. We are the body. In all our mixture, we are the body that he wants to have, that he wants to pervade with his resurrected presence, laboring to bind us into a unity while supporting healthy disagreements and tensions that can lead to deeper life. There's good tensions. I don't like, I know that I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. I don't like tension, but I know in theory there are good tensions, and we're supposed to, we're supposed to live with them and learn from them. But the presence of the Lord in the church, like Jesus asleep on the stern, is mysterious to us. Mysterious to us. We know he will never abandon us. He will never abandon the church. Never. There will always be a community of witnesses in humanity, in the human race on planet Earth. That's guaranteed. There's no guaranteed how many witnesses there will be. And that's very sobering. Look what's happened to the church in Ireland, the church in Italy. There's no guarantee. It's a dance of divine freedom and human freedom, always. How are we making our choices? What kind of choices are we making? In the midst of all of this, in the midst of the graces and the gifts we do indeed experience, but also in the midst of these roiling issues that have everything to do with human well-being and human, the doing in of the human. We're called, and we have, I haven't even mentioned the pandemic. We're changing as church because of these 15 months of experience. Some people have discovered technology as allowing a real possibility of faith sharing, of serious, deep faith sharing. And they don't want to let go of that once we get back to some new normal. There's a new level of communication, paradoxically, that has happened because of technology. There are people who have found they're opened up to the wider church by having access to all kinds of venues for Eucharist without leaving the comfort of their living room. Some people really want to hold on to that. And some people have gotten very used to not going to church in one form or another for 15 months and might stay used to that. All kinds of possibilities now. We're different. And we can't be hoping to simply slide back to some past. It's going to be a new future with continuity with the past, but with really new choices too. The killer is God keeps asking us, and the risen Christ keeps asking us to keep maturing in faith. And I want to say, stop it. I've grown up enough. Stop it. But no, they're relentless. We have to keep being purified and keep being deepened and keep finding out what is God and what is not divine that we've attached to as excessively and are being pulled away from because it isn't God. Only God is God. And that's a learning through a lifetime, isn't it? I get very attached to certain things associated with God, but they ain't God. And you keep being forced to taste that. There's a growing up that's going to be a terminal experience, It won't stop, the invitation to grow up. And the set of circumstances we live in now, the first ones was plenty, curriculum that's huge, but then the pandemic is added on to that curriculum, inviting us to stretch in ways we don't want to stretch. But we're invited to do discernment. What's God calling me and us to now, given what we keep on learning about ourselves, our world, our fragility and our strengths? We have a lot of new information and wisdom about ourselves, and God wants to make use of it. Sometimes, the Lord stops the storm, at least temporarily. I hear tell the Sea of Siberia, Galilee had other storms after Jesus settled that one. It wasn't the end of the story. But there are other times he's inviting us to live in the storm, to find the healthy, loving way of living in the storm when the storm doesn't cease, doesn't become a dead calm. And that's where we are now, I think. Learning how to live lovingly, in greater sense of justice, greater sense of accountability, more humility, how to live in the roiling waters that aren't going to go away for a while. They're not going to go away for a while. They're roiling. They can be disorienting, but it's also where we become vulnerable to God's love in deeper and deeper ways. If we let that winnowing process that God's love is doing with us to continue, that winnowing process.